Depth Realms warmly greets you. Asterisk asterisk. Have you ever met someone who didn't need to say many words? Someone whose mere presence was enough to make the defensive walls within you tremble, and then gradually open up? It wasn't a scrutinizing gaze, nor some vague intuition. It was a presence, heavy and real, like a crystal-clear stream quietly weaving through the cracks of stone, reaching into the deepest corners where no one else had ever looked. You feel as though this person knows things you've never shared. They hear the weary sigh behind the smile you've been forcing for too long. They reach into emotional places you haven't even dared to name, much less face. And strangely enough, they don't ask. They don't expose. They don't do anything, really. Yet somehow, they make you start listening to yourself more deeply than you ever have before. It's a kind of listening that is utterly accepting and judgment-free, as though you've finally found a safe space where everything within you is allowed to exist. Carl Jung was one of those people, but he never claimed to be someone who could read minds. To him, the mind was merely a shell. What he sought was the soul, and the soul doesn't need to speak to be heard. He once said, in a quiet but deeply understanding voice, "Everyone carries a story within them, but not everyone has the language to tell it. My job isn't to force them to speak, but to create a space where that story can walk out on its own." In today's noisy world, where everyone is trying to be heard, to be understood, to be validated, the ability to truly listen to someone without them having to say a word feels like a rare luxury. And yet, it's precisely what the soul longs for most. Not a rushed reply, not a dry analysis, but a presence, deep and still, enough to draw out that part within each of us that has never been touched, and allow it to finally speak. Jung didn't do this with hollow theories. He did it with a stillness forged through years of facing his own inner shadow. He didn't place himself above others. He sat beside a soul that was lost and spoke through his presence alone. I've been there too. Tu wet voy. Dui de la fan tu qua ban dike tieng on. Teep noi mok noi dung tu fan truok. Jafong catch sao lang va tri and cam. This ability to read minds, as people often attributed to him, was in fact something else entirely. Jung didn't read thoughts, he read living symbols. He saw the unspoken language expressed through people's behaviors. The energy they radiated, their unconscious reactions, the heavy silences, and the things they repeated without understanding why. He didn't care what was written on your resume. He observed where you swallowed hard, where your smile tilted when you mentioned someone's name, what you rejected with a voice slightly higher than usual. And he knew it right there. That's where the shadow lives. That's where it's trying to speak. But Jung never dragged the shadow into the light. He invited it, gently, respectfully, like welcoming a long-lost guest finally returning home. His entire method didn't rely on sharp questions or clever words. It lay in his courage to look without judgment, to stay when others couldn't even bear to face themselves, and to believe that beneath every surface behavior, there was a reason, a story untold, a part unloved. Silence doesn't mean avoidance. It doesn't mean running from the truth. It means becoming quiet enough for what truly needs to be said to arise, untainted by internal or external expectations. You don't need to be a psychoanalyst to practice this. You just need to relearn an ancient art lost in the haste of modern life. The art of presence. The art of being truly sincere. Not to know more, but to miss less. To catch what's really happening. In a glance, in a pause, in an offbeat gesture, or in a faint, emotional breath. This journey you're about to embark on is not a dry course in observational skills. It's a path inward, so that when you look at others, you no longer see them through the distorted images or echoed voices of your own unhealed self. And in that moment, without a word, you begin to hear what they've never dared to say. What lies buried at the core of their soul. This is what Jung left us. Not a technique, not a theory, but a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of honoring the sacredness in every silence, so that the soul may begin to speak. There are people who don't need to say a single word, and yet, when they're present, all our inner defenses quietly begin to melt away. It's not because they wield power, not because they're clever or sharp or charismatic, but because they embody something rare, an inner stillness so deep. It feels like they can hear the things you never dared to voice. Jung called this the first layer of truly seeing a person. Not through their words, but through what happens when words fall away. To Jung, silence wasn't an empty void. It was the place where the mind stops performing and the truth begins to appear raw and unfiltered. We live in a world obsessed with speaking. Everyone wants to be heard, understood, responded to. Asterisk, asterisk, instantly asterisk, asterisk. But the more we talk, the more we strive to present ourselves perfectly. The more we drift from the truth within. Because in speech, we often hide behind a script, a role we've rehearsed, a mask carefully adjusted to meet expectations. But in silence, what surfaces is uncertainty, hesitation, the quiet tremble of inner conflict. And sometimes, asterisk, asterisk, the soul itself, asterisk, asterisk, begins to whisper. Jung didn't need you to say much. He needed you to sit down and be still. Because when a person is no longer upheld by the scaffolding of words, they begin to reveal themselves through. Asterisk, a slight twitch of the eye. Asterisk, a breath that catches. Asterisk, a crooked, reluctant smile. Asterisk, a nervous gulp. Asterisk, or how they fold their hands in an effort to soothe the discomfort rising from within. These subtle movements are not meaningless. They are gateways, leading straight into the depth of the soul. Have you ever noticed how someone's posture changes when a certain topic is mentioned? They laugh, but their eyes look away. They say, "It's nothing," while their hands clench with tension. This isn't deception. It isn't manipulation. It's the subconscious rising to the surface. Not yet fully conscious. To Jung, every inconsistency between voice and body, between words and energy, was not a flaw. It was a symbol, and you should never interpret a symbol literally. You must read it as part of a whole, as a stroke in the psychological map of that person's inner world. Silence doesn't make people shrink in a negative way. It allows the truest part of them to emerge, tentatively, but clearly. Because nothing brings someone closer to their soul than a deep, non-judgmental presence, asterisk, asterisk. One that does not rush to diagnose, analyze, or interrupt. Strangely enough, in that kind of silence, you no longer need to guess what someone is thinking. You simply begin to feel what is not being said. You connect with the energy beneath their silence. A person who cannot maintain eye contact may be shielding an inner wound that hasn't healed. Someone who avoids direct questions might be trying to protect their most fragile self. A forced cheerfulness can be a desperate attempt to mask a deeply buried vulnerability. In all of this, Jung wasn't just listening to what was said. He listened to resistance, to the clash between the conscious self and what lies beneath. He once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their own soul." Asterisk, asterisk. And in silence, that resistance, the thing they're trying so hard to avoid, often reveals itself most clearly, in ways they cannot control. The art of silent presence. When was the last time you truly sat in silence with someone? No probing questions. No effort to fill the space. Just presence. Did you notice their breath faltering? Did you feel what they weren't saying, but what their body was whispering? If so, then you've already touched the first symbol in their inner map, a signal from the soul's deeper terrain. Jung didn't read minds like a magician or hypnotist. He simply didn't rush. He didn't interfere too soon with the natural unfolding of the psyche. And most importantly, he didn't try to make others feel something to fit his expectations. Because it is in this absence of pressure that the truth is free to appear without distortion. What makes Jung's silence so powerful? After all, not all silence is healing. Some silence makes others shrink, recoil, or feel judged. But Jung's silence was symbolic. It was radical acceptance, so deep, so gentle that it required no fixing, no immediate answer. He didn't say, "I understand you." He just remained still. And in that stillness, you could feel his unspoken message. You don't have to try anymore. I am listening, with my whole presence. Asterisk, asterisk. To Jung, truly seeing another person wasn't about fixing them, or turning them into someone else. It was about offering them a mirror, a non-judgmental one. And in order to offer that, you first had to stop trying. Asterisk, stop trying to understand with the mind. Asterisk, stop analyzing to gain control. Asterisk, stop rushing to reach a conclusion. Truth does not appear when you chase it. It appears when you become quiet enough to let it speak for itself gently from within. Have you ever heard someone say something that sounded perfectly reasonable, but the moment their words entered the room, the air turned heavy? Some people smile at all the right moments. They say all the positive things, but somehow something feels off, as if their soul isn't present in the story they're telling. Jung didn't care whether your words were right or wrong. He paid attention to something subtler, but far more real: your energy. Every person walks into a room with their own energetic field. Nobody enters with just their footsteps. They bring with them a silent swirl of unspoken thoughts, suppressed emotions, unmet desires, and lingering questions that haven't found form. This energy isn't seen with the eyes, but it is always felt. The discrepancy between words and vibration. Jung didn't sense energy like a mystic. He simply noticed when things didn't align, when what a person said didn't match what they radiated. He once said, with the clarity of someone who had truly seen into human nature, "The discrepancy between words and energy is where the soul begins to tell the truth." Because energy never lies. A person may say, "I'm fine," but there's an emptiness in their voice, a small constriction in the throat, an eye that can't hold contact, a smile that stops at the lips but never reaches the eyes. Jung didn't need to ask much, because the truth wasn't in the sentence, "I'm fine." It was in the unspoken, "I'm not okay," that moved softly through the room after the words were spoken. An authentic wave of emotion, invisible but undeniable. The body always speaks. People think they can pretend, perform, or push through, but energy always finds a way to reveal the truth. To anyone quiet enough to feel it, Jung never exposed anyone. He never said, "I know you're lying." Instead, he would ask, with infinite compassion, "You seem to be holding a lot inside. Does your body feel heavy?" And in that moment, what followed was rarely a casual answer. It was often the release of emotion long carried. A sigh. A trembling. A sudden tearing up. Or the breaking of a dam they never even knew existed. Because that part of them, the most truthful, buried part, had finally been seen. Without judgment, without pressure. This is what made Jung different. He didn't read minds through assumptions. He read through resonance. He listened to the gaps between words and tone, to the misalignment between content and vibration. And he understood something essential. The more someone tries to control their story, the more they reveal the split between ego and soul. This isn't weakness. This isn't a failure. It's a signal, a gateway to the place they most need healing. Have you ever spent time with someone who said they were happy, yet after the conversation, you felt a strange sadness lingering in your chest? They didn't cry. They didn't complain. They didn't say anything obviously painful. But still, you left feeling a quiet heaviness, as if something deep inside them had breathed through you, without ever being named. Jung called this the reverse current, a stream of energy flowing against the surface narrative. It's the undercurrent beneath a calm sea, the deeper truth that contradicts what is being said on the surface. And if you're sensitive, if your presence is still and grounded, you'll feel it, not through logic, not through analysis, but through your own field of resonance. Truth has a frequency. To Jung, a person who speaks well isn't someone with polished words. It's someone whose inner frequency matches their truth. When words and energy are aligned, people feel real. You may not agree with them, but you trust them because something inside you relaxes. But when words and energy mismatch, people can't always explain why, but they feel. Distant. Off. Hard to believe. Not because of any logical reason, but because the vibration isn't authentic. Jung didn't need to call this out. He didn't need to confront or expose. He simply recognized it. And in doing so, his own field of presence began to shift the dynamic. When your presence doesn't reinforce the performance, when you don't feed the act, the other person senses it, and slowly, they begin to. Breathe differently. Speak with more honesty. Pause instead of performing. Not because you forced them, but because your energy invited their truth to surface. No effort, just presence. You don't need to work hard to see through someone's mask. You don't need clever techniques to know when someone's energy is off. You only need to be fully there, without judgment, without expectation, without the need to react, fix, or prove anything. And in your stillness, their misalignment begins to reveal itself. Not to be judged, not to be corrected, but to be seen, to be accepted, to be met in truth. Jung understood this. Most people don't choose to live out of alignment. They were taught, from a young age, that in order to be loved, accepted, or safe, they had to become someone other than who they really are. Over time, the role became a second skin. So familiar, they forgot it was a performance. And that's why their energy feels tired. Their words feel hollow. Their smile doesn't quite reach the soul. If you are someone who learns to see deeply, like Jung, you won't blame them. You won't try to expose or fix them. Instead, you'll reach for the part that still remembers who they really are. With a slow nod, a soft silence, a space wide enough to hold everything they've been afraid to show. And in that sacred space, they may, for the first time, realize that they don't need to pretend anymore. There are things people react to, too quickly, too intensely, too defensively. Someone hears an idea and dismisses it within seconds. Someone witnesses another's pain and shrugs it off with cold indifference. Someone receives a gentle comment, but responds with sarcasm or mockery, as if their very identity had been threatened. Jung saw these not as personality quirks, but as footprints of the shadow. Not evil, not bad, but rejected. The shadow isn't the dark, monstrous part of us. It's the part we've learned to hide it. The feelings, desires, impulses, and wounds that were once too unsafe to express. Over time, we locked them away, not because they were wrong, but because we were told. If you want to be loved, you can't show this. And so they slip beneath awareness. Silent, forgotten, but not dead. The shadow speaks through reaction. The shadow doesn't reveal itself in calm conversations or logical thoughts. It comes out in reactions. The person who despises vulnerability, even when no one is threatening them, may be running from the part of themselves that once needed to cry, and was never allowed to. The person who judges others for being different, even when that difference causes no harm, may be defending a part of themselves that was once shamed for not fitting in. The person who speaks loudly about morality and kindness, to the point of making others feel small, may be masking their own fear of being exposed as unworthy. These aren't signs of virtue or strength. They are clues. Clues that the shadow is rising, trying to be seen. Because when you've made peace with a part of yourself, you no longer need to fight it in others. Jung never hunted the shadow to condemn it. He didn't shine a harsh light into someone's darkness to catch their flaws. He simply asked, with profound compassion, "Why does that bother you so much? What are you trying to prove? What are you defending as if losing it would mean losing yourself?" Where we tense up, where we overreact, where we need to prove, protect, or reject, that is where the shadow lives. And it is not there to destroy us. It is there, waiting to be accepted. Examples of the shadow in action. A person constantly saying, "I'm never jealous," might be hiding a deep fear of being replaced or unseen. Someone who mocks others for being small or unsuccessful may be battling their own unresolved fear of failure. The one who insists, "I don't need anyone," could be protecting a childhood wound of abandonment. If you listen closely, they aren't speaking truths. They're building walls, and behind each wall is a forgotten voice. A younger self, saying, "Please don't leave me like that again." You don't have to be a therapist to see the shadow. You only need to stop listening to what people are trying to say, and start listening to what they're trying not to say. Look at their defensiveness, and gently ask, not with judgment, but with presence, "What about this scares you?" Asterisk asterisk. What are you trying to hide from yourself? If asked with sincerity and stillness, these questions can open entire landscapes of memory, where the shadow has waited for years to be acknowledged. Jung called the shadow the door to light. A paradox, but a beautiful one, because what we reject most in ourselves is often the very thing that, once embraced, leads us home. Not everything you do is a conscious choice. Not every pattern you repeat is a preference. Sometimes, it's a contract your soul once signed. A silent agreement formed long before you had words for it. Have you ever noticed yourself always? Asterisk being the one who apologizes first, even when you were hurt. Asterisk taking responsibility for everything, as if it's your duty to fix it all. Asterisk trying to be useful, likable, or good, even when no one asked you to. Asterisk feeling like you must stay careful, cautious, measured in every situation. No one told you to be this way, at least not recently. But somewhere deep inside, a voice keeps whispering, I have to. Asterisk asterisk. That is the voice of the unconscious contract. The unconscious contract, a survival promise. Carl Jung saw these not as flaws, not as identity, but as survival mechanisms born in childhood or in response to early emotional wounds. A child who is only loved when obedient learns to sign a contract. I must never upset anyone. Asterisk asterisk. A child who was ignored unless they were helpful signs, I must always be useful or I will be forgotten. A child who was punished for expressing anger learns, I must always be kind, even if it hurts. These contracts are rarely spoken, but they are etched into the nervous system, embedded in how we move, speak, relate, and live. We don't remember making them, but they run our lives. You've grown, but the contract stayed. The problem is not that you once made these contracts. At the time, they protected you. They helped you survive. The problem is that you never revisited them. You never asked, do these still serve me? Asterisk asterisk. So you keep living as if those childhood conditions are still in place, even though you're no longer the child who signed them. That's why you feel stuck. That's why you feel exhausted. You're following rules that don't belong to the life you have now. Recognizing the pattern. Look at your life. Asterisk, is there something you keep doing, even though it drains you? Asterisk, a type of person you're repeatedly drawn to, even when it hurts. Asterisk, a role you keep playing in relationships, work, or family, without ever choosing it. Asterisk, a behavior you can't seem to stop, even though it no longer fits. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I stop doing this? Who told me I had to be this way? Don't rush the answer. Just sit with the question. Because in that space, the old contract might begin to surface. And once seen, it can finally be rewritten. Jung didn't ask you to rebel. He asked you to wake up. He didn't ask you to abandon your responsibilities. He asked you to ask, am I doing this from fear or from truth? Asterisk asterisk. There's a vast difference between asterisk choosing to help someone and helping because you're terrified of being unloved if you don't. Asterisk speaking kindly and silencing your needs because you fear rejection. Asterisk striving for excellence and chasing success because deep down you believe failure means you're worthless. Awareness is what creates the space for choice. And only when there is choice can there be freedom. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work. It doesn't come from pressure or difficult relationships. It comes from within, a silent tug of war between parts of yourself. Asterisk, one voice says, let go. Another whispers, keep trying. Asterisk, one part craves freedom. Another fears being hurt. Asterisk, you say, I'm fine. But deep down, you know you're not. This is where the ego and the shadow begin to collide. And for Jung, this wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the very place where transformation begins. When inner conflict appears, healing is near asterisk asterisk. You don't truly grow by choosing light and avoiding darkness. You grow when you can hold both asterisk asterisk without denying either asterisk asterisk. Most people, when inner conflict arises, do the opposite. They pick a side. They choose the part they're proud of. The strong side, the smart side, the likable, acceptable side. And they suppress the part they fear. The confused one, the angry one, the tired one, the tender one. But the part you push away doesn't disappear. It just retreats deeper. And then it shows up again. Asterisk in sudden anger. Asterisk in numbness. Asterisk in regret over things you didn't mean to say or do. Jung never wanted you to become pure. He wanted you to become whole. Wholeness isn't simplicity, it's unity. Real healing doesn't come from fixing what's wrong. It comes from honoring every part of what's true. To Jung, your confusion is sacred. Your inner contradiction is not failure. It's contact. Contact between who you thought you had to be and the part of you that's finally ready to come home. Think of it as two tides meeting. Of course it churns the waters. Of course it creates discomfort. But only in this turbulence can a new self begin to emerge. You are not breaking, you are reorganizing. Have you ever felt lost in life? Asterisk, when what used to make you happy no longer does. Asterisk, when your usual roles, friend, achiever, helper, feel hollow. Asterisk when your identity starts slipping and you don't know what's next. Jung wouldn't see this as a breakdown. He'd call it breakthrough. Not because it's pleasant, but because it means your old self can no longer hold all of you. The structure is cracking, not from failure, but from growth. You are not falling apart. You are reassembling from truth. Let the tension exist. When the conflict shows up, don't rush to fix it. Don't label it wrong. Don't flee from it. Just pause and ask. Asterisk, what are these parts trying to say to me? Asterisk, what would happen if I stopped trying to win and started trying to listen? Because when the ego loosens its grip, the shadow dares to speak. And when they meet, not in combat, but in compassion, you begin to experience something new. Integration. Sometimes, what feels like falling apart is actually the beginning of something far more honest. When the person you thought you were no longer fits the life you're living. When your old strengths begin to feel like armor and your roles feel like cages. When your inner voice says, I don't want to live like this anymore. But you don't yet know what comes next. You are not collapsing. You are awakening. Jung believed this moment, this quiet breaking, was not a problem to solve. It was a rite of passage. You're not lost. You're leaving a life that no longer fits. The confusion you feel? It's not failure. It's a sign that the script you followed for so long is no longer aligned with your soul. You're not wrong for questioning. Asterisk the job that once gave you pride. Asterisk the relationship you used to define yourself by. Asterisk the identity you wore like a badge. What once kept you safe may now be holding you back. And the part of you that's been buried, your intuition, your longing, your tired truth, is finally surfacing. Yes, it brings discomfort, but it also brings something rare, a chance to live more honestly. This isn't breakdown. It's breakthrough. Asterisk asterisk. We tend to fear these seasons because they look messy. They feel uncertain. They don't come with clarity or answers. But Jung taught that true transformation never begins with certainty. It begins with chaos, with questions, with contradiction. To stand at the crossroads of your old self and your emerging truth. That is where the work begins. That is where you reclaim the parts of yourself you silenced for too long. Don't rush to become better. When people enter this stage of unraveling, they often rush to fix it. Asterisk read more books. Asterisk do more healing. Asterisk set new goals. Asterisk find new meaning. Asterisk force a new identity. But Jung would say, don't move yet. Don't patch the cracks before you understand what's breaking. Instead ask, asterisk which part of me was never allowed to speak. Asterisk what version of myself is no longer true. Asterisk what am I afraid to feel, but need to feel to become whole? Let the soul speak in its own time. The ego wants a solution. The soul wants to be heard. Let your discomfort speak. Let your inner tension be a messenger, not a mistake. The voice that says, I don't know who I am anymore, is the voice of a self that's finally willing to meet itself. Not as a role, not as a mask, but as something honest, complex, and new. There is a way of listening that asks no questions. A form of connection that doesn't need to touch. A kind of empathy that speaks no words of comfort, yet heals more deeply than any advice. It is called presence, but not in the ordinary sense. Carl Jung spoke of a different kind of presence. Symbolic presence. A state of being where someone feels so safe in your energy that they no longer need to perform, so still in your silence, that their soul begins to speak. The unconscious doesn't respond to pressure. You can't summon someone's deepest truth with clever questions. You can't force their unconscious to reveal itself with insight or technique. You can only create a space where it chooses asterisk asterisk on its own asterisk asterisk to come forward. That space is not built by knowledge. It is built by energy. The energy of a person who has stopped trying to. Asterisk control. Asterisk be right. Asterisk fix. Asterisk or be recognized. Jung didn't use force, he used presence. He didn't push people into self-awareness. He didn't lead them into their wounds. He simply stayed, still, open, non-judgmental. And in that quiet, something began to move. The person across from him started to breathe differently, to pause, to listen, to feel things they had long suppressed. Why? Because they were no longer being observed like a problem. They were being witnessed as a whole human. Have you ever sat with someone like that? Someone who said nothing, but in their eyes, you felt seen? Someone whose silence wasn't uncomfortable, but instead made you feel like, for the first time, you didn't have to hold it all together? That's symbolic presence. It doesn't come from reading books. It doesn't come from psychological mastery. It comes from your own inner work. From having sat with your own shadow, your own confusion, your own pain, ***, without fleeing ***. When you can hold your own darkness, you can hold theirs. You don't create healing presence by saying the right things. You create it by being the kind of space you once needed yourself. Not reactive, not performative, not trying to save anyone. Just here. * without labeling. * without interrupting. * without filling the silence. Just being. And in that being, offering the rarest gift. You don't need to be anything for me. You're already enough. You don't need to be a master of psychology to help someone heal. You don't need perfect words or years of training. You only need to be honest. So honest. You no longer need to hide any part of yourself. And when you can be that honest, when your presence is clean of pretense, people feel it, not with their minds, but with their bodies. Their breath shifts. Their walls soften. Because in your presence, they sense. I don't have to perform here. ***. You heal others by letting them be themselves. Jung didn't believe healing was about doing something to someone. He believed it happened when one soul finally felt safe enough to drop the mask, not because they were persuaded, not because they were fixed, but because they were finally witnessed without being judged. Real presence has no agenda. You're not there to * make someone feel better. * offer instant answers. * prove your wisdom. * say the perfect thing. You're there to do one thing. Stay. Stay when they're silent. Stay when they're angry. Stay when they don't make sense. Stay when they show you the messy, scared, uncertain parts of themselves. Because when everyone else is left, the one who doesn't, that's the one who heals. You can't rush the soul. Jung knew that people don't open up on command. The unconscious doesn't work that way. You don't guide someone to truth by pressing. You guide them by not leaving when the truth begins to surface. He once said, a person begins to heal, not when they understand their problem, but when they are seen, without judgment. Not with the eyes, but with the heart that stays. The presence that doesn't pull away. The stillness that holds space. There is no magic, only resonance. When you hold space without trying to change someone, you're already changing something inside them. You're telling their soul, it's safe now. You don't have to pretend. I see you, even here. Especially here. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to challenge them. You just have to be there, ***, for real ***. And in that realness, something begins to soften, open, and breathe again. Sometimes, that's all someone has ever needed. Not every action is just a habit. Not every quirk is random. And not every repeated behavior is meaningless. To Jung, every gesture, every reaction, every unusual pattern, no matter how small, was a symbol, a living message, a whisper from the soul, trying to speak through the body. Behavior as symbol, not symptom. We often say, ***, he's just an anxious guy. ***, she's overly sensitive. ***, they're controlling. ***, that's just how I am. But Jung refused to stop at those labels. He saw deeper. The man who taps his fingers obsessively when stressed? Maybe he once lived in a world where no one listened unless he made noise. The woman who laughs loudly when talking about past pain? Maybe laughter was her only way to survive the ache that was too sharp to feel. The person who double-checks the door 3 times before leaving? Maybe they once lived through a chaos they had no power to stop. And now their body replays a ritual of safety. Nothing is just a habit. Jung never saw people as bundles of faulty wiring. He saw them as mythic beings living out personal legends. Each act was a symbol in motion. Each habit, no matter how strange, held meaning. To him, the woman who always sits leaning forward when talking, as if trying to close the distance, isn't just expressive. She might be someone who's never truly felt seen. Her body leans forward to say what her voice cannot. Please, come closer. ***. Don't diagnose, decode. Jung didn't read behaviors like a machine. He didn't say, "I shift means deception," or "crossed arms mean defensiveness." He knew, humans are not codes. They are stories, layered, symbolic, and sacred. To understand a behavior, you must understand the context, the soul it belongs to. A repeated gesture isn't just a reflex. It might be the echo of an emotion too long unspoken. A nervous habit isn't meaningless. It could be the body trying to remember something lost. You don't need to fix it, just witness it. When you see someone pacing, fidgeting, over-explaining, withdrawing, don't rush to interrupt. Don't analyze. Instead, ask gently, what might this part of you be trying to say? That question alone, if held with compassion, can turn a defensive act into a doorway. Because when someone realizes that you're not judging their behavior, you're listening to it, they begin to do the same. They begin to hear themselves. And that is where healing starts. Every person is living a story, not always the one they chose, but one that has chosen them. A story written not with words, but with patterns, emotions, behaviors, and unconscious repetition. Carl Jung called this the personal myth. And whether you're aware of it or not, you are living yours. You are not just a personality, you are a narrative. That woman who keeps telling the same old story from her past. It's not because she's forgetful. It's because that story has never been truly heard. Never been placed in its proper context. That man who always rushes to conclusions. It's not arrogance. It may be a part of him that's terrified of the unknown, that never learned how to sit in uncertainty. The young person who laughs whenever feelings come up. They're not immature. They may have never been taught that emotion is safe, that tears aren't dangerous. You are acting out a myth you haven't named. Jung believed, behind every behavior is not just a cause, but a symbol, a piece of a larger story, a myth in motion. Most people don't realize what myth they're living. They just know. Asterisk, they keep choosing the same kind of relationships. Asterisk, they always end up in the same emotional loops. Asterisk, they play the same roles in groups, caretaker, peacemaker, rebel. Asterisk, they keep trying to prove something, even when no one is asking. These are not just habits. They're rituals. Rituals of a personal myth, replayed, not yet seen. A myth left in the dark will control you, until you become conscious of the myth you're living. It will live you. You'll think, this is just who I am. But it's not. It's a contract you never questioned. A costume you never removed. A character you were cast into. Perhaps long ago, by family, by trauma, by silence. Jung once warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You're not fated, you're unaware. To break free, you don't need to destroy the myth. You need to recognize it. You need to ask, asterisk, whose story am I repeating? Asterisk, what is the theme of my life's patterns? Asterisk, which character have I become without realizing it? Asterisk, what must I let go of to live as myself and not as the myth I inherited? This is not rebellion. It's liberation. You are not just your personality. You are not just your past. You are a vessel through which ancient patterns flow. Carl Jung called them archetypes. They are not chosen by you. They live through you. They are the timeless roles, energies, and instincts that shape how we think, feel, and act, often without us realizing. You don't become the archetype, it becomes you. You don't decide to be the rescuer. You feel pulled to fix everyone. You don't choose to be the caregiver. You simply can't stop giving until you're empty. You don't aim to be the warrior, but you live in constant alert, always fighting for control or safety. These are not conscious decisions. They are inner blueprints passed down through time, from family, culture, collective memory. And if unexamined, they become your fate. Jung didn't label, he asked deeper questions. He never said, you're acting like a hero or a martyr or a victim. Instead, he asked, which voice is speaking through you right now? Which pattern is holding the script to your life? Because the moment you ask that, you stop being the puppet of that role and start becoming its witness. That's where healing begins. Not by rejecting the archetype, but by disidentifying from it. When you're possessed by the archetype, you think it's you. You think, asterisk, I must always be strong. Asterisk, I must save everyone. Asterisk, I can't ever be a burden. Asterisk, I'm the one who holds it all together. But really, you're carrying a role that's carrying you. And you're exhausted. Because no archetype is meant to be lived forever. It's meant to move through you, not define you. Freedom is not rebellion. It's awareness. Jung didn't tell you to destroy the archetype. He invited you to make space between you and it. To say, asterisk, I see you, caregiver. Asterisk, I honor you, warrior. Asterisk, you helped me survive. But I'm more than you now. And when that space opens, you finally get to ask, who am I? When I'm not trying to be who I had to be. Asterisk, asterisk. Not every belief you hold is your truth. Some of them are contracts, written not with ink, but with fear, survival, and silence. Carl Jung understood that much of our suffering doesn't come from what's happening now, but from old promises we made to ourselves long ago. Not with words, but with emotions, with instinct, with the desperate need to feel safe, loved, accepted. The unconscious contract sounds like this asterisk. Asterisk, I must always be helpful or I'll be abandoned. Asterisk, I must never show anger or I'll lose love. Asterisk, if I rest, I'm lazy and unworthy. Asterisk, I have to succeed or I don't deserve respect. Asterisk, I must keep others happy, even if I'm suffering. Asterisk, if I ever stop trying, I'll be forgotten. You don't remember signing these, but they govern your life. Why do we sign them? Because once they protected us. The child who was only valued for being good learned to suppress all rebellion. The one punished for expressing pain learned to smile even when breaking. The one ignored unless achieving learned to chase success at any cost. These contracts were survival strategies. They kept us safe. They helped us belong. But we never went back to check. Do they still serve me now? You grew. The contract didn't. Asterisk, asterisk. And so you live like this. Asterisk, still trying to prove your worth. Asterisk, still afraid of being a burden. Asterisk, still terrified of resting, failing, or needing. Asterisk, still hustling for a love you already deserve. You are no longer the child who needed those promises. But the contract is still running the show. That's why you feel. Asterisk, burned out. Asterisk, hollow. Asterisk, unfulfilled, even when successful. You're living by rules you didn't create, and that you're now strong enough to release. Jung didn't tell you to rebel. He invited you to reclaim. He didn't say, break free. He said, look gently. What part of you is still afraid? Because the unconscious contract is not your enemy. It is your younger self's voice, still waiting to be heard. And when you turn to that voice with compassion, you can say, thank you for protecting me, but I don't need this rule anymore. I choose differently now. And that is how freedom begins. There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from physical effort, but from an inner tension you can't explain. It's not the world that's too loud. It's the voices inside you, pulling in opposite directions. Asterisk, one says, you need to slow down. Another whispers, don't you dare fall behind. Asterisk, one aches for rest. Another fears being seen as weak. Asterisk, one wants to be honest. Another trembles at the thought of not being accepted. Carl Jung didn't see this as pathology. He saw it as the gateway to transformation. The inner conflict is the invitation. You are not broken because you feel torn. You are not failing because your heart and mind disagree. You are simply arriving at the crossroads of who you've been and who you're becoming. Jung believed that real change begins, not when everything is clear, but when nothing quite fits anymore. Not the old roles, not the old explanations, not even the old version of you. Wholeness comes not from choosing a side, but from holding both. Most people, when they feel conflicted, try to pick a winner. Asterisk, strength over softness. Asterisk, logic over feeling. Asterisk, productivity over peace. Asterisk, certainty over curiosity. But healing isn't about dominance. It's about integration. To Jung, your wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from your capacity to contain contradictions. To say, yes, I want to rest. Yes, I fear being forgotten. And both are true. Asterisk, asterisk. The ego will panic. Let it. When the old you begins to fall apart. The ego scrambles to restore order. It tells you, asterisk, you're going backwards. Asterisk, you're losing yourself. Asterisk, you shouldn't feel like this. Asterisk, be strong, get over it. But the ego is only trying to survive. Meanwhile, the soul is doing something deeper. It is reorganizing, rebalancing, reshaping your inner world so that more of you can exist. Asterisk, asterisk, not just the part that performed. Asterisk, asterisk. Don't silence the conflict, sit with it. Jung didn't want you to fix the contradiction. He wanted you to stay with it. To say, both sides have something to say. I will not rush either away. Because in that space, between the voices, something new is born. Not a solution. A synthesis. A new self, capable of living in nuance, rather than extremes. You cannot force the soul to speak. You cannot rush someone into self-awareness. You cannot demand that truth arrive on your schedule. Carl Jung understood. The unconscious opens only when it feels safe. Not intellectually safe, but energetically, emotionally, and symbolically safe. And what creates that safety? Your presence. Not your words. Not your advice. Not even your understanding. Just your stillness. Just your willingness to stay, without fixing, judging, or interpreting. You can't invite depth with shallow presence. Most people listen with one part of themselves, and plan a response with another. They don't really listen. They analyze. They try to fix. They wait to speak. But the soul cannot open in the face of scrutiny. It opens only in the face of non-demanding presence. When someone feels, asterisk, I'm not being rushed. Asterisk, I'm not being diagnosed. Asterisk, I'm not being improved. They begin to let go. The deeper the presence, the fewer the words needed. Jung didn't offer immediate interpretation. He didn't say, here's what your pain means. He stayed quiet, attuned, and in that quiet, people often said things they never expected to say, because no one had ever held space long enough for their real truth to feel safe enough to appear. You don't have to pull it out. You just have to not leave when it arrives. The soul speaks in subtle signals. Sometimes, it's not even in the words. It's in asterisk a shallow breath, asterisk a trembling lip, asterisk a hand clenching, then loosening, asterisk a pause that lasts just 1 second longer than usual. That's where the truth lives. Not in the dramatic, but in the delicate. And if you interrupt that space, the moment disappears. If you stay, it deepens. Your stillness is the medicine. People do not need you to change them. They need you to remain unmoved by their chaos. To not flinch when they say something messy. To not offer advice too soon. To not mirror their panic with more panic. To say instead, with your calm presence, I see you, even in this. Especially in this. That's when healing begins. Not because you did anything, but because for once in their life, someone didn't run. You don't need more knowledge to touch someone's soul. You don't need perfect words, the right analysis, or a technique that impresses. You only need to be real. Real with yourself. Real with your presence. Real enough to stop performing it and start witnessing. Carl Jung didn't try to heal people by fixing them. He healed by seeing them. Completely. Quietly. Without turning away. You become the mirror. Not a mirror of judgment. Not a mirror of expectation. But a mirror so still. So grounded in your own wholeness. That someone else can finally see themselves. Without shame. That is how people heal. Not because they're told to, but because they're invited, without pressure. They see their reflection in your calm. They hear their own voice in your silence. They feel their own depth through your gentleness. And suddenly, they begin to return home. No need to be the expert. The people around you don't need your brilliance. They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to stay. When they become imperfect, they need to know that someone can hold their pain without shrinking. They need to know that someone can see their confusion without needing to solve it. That someone can witness their shadow without flinching. That someone can sit beside their fear without feeding it. Presence is not passive, it's transformational. When you stop performing, others stop pretending. When you stop rushing to fix, others begin to feel safe in their brokenness. When you stop explaining, others begin to hear their own truth more clearly. And when you stop needing to be understood, you begin to understand everything. Jung's legacy wasn't a method, it was a way of being. To live symbolically, to listen without dissecting, to feel energy more than words, to stay present without agenda, to see behavior as story, not mistake, to honor silence as sacred, not empty, to witness the soul without needing to shape it. He didn't offer us a manual. He offered us a mirror. And if you dare to hold it, without trembling, without judgment, you too become the space where truth returns, where masks fall, and where healing finally begins. You are not here to read minds. You are here to meet souls. And you cannot meet someone else's soul until you've met your own. Carl Jung did that. And through his silence, so can you.